it's important that you not put planning on a pedestal. And the people who plan on a pedestal, they're just like you. They're just as discombobulated. They have just as many different distractions pulling them off of that plan. But the fact that the plan exists means they'll trend more towards it than if it didn't. And that's really what it's the long-term planning is all about.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast, brought to you by entrepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. I'm your host, Circa. With me, as always, is Corrin, but this time she's in London, actually. Isn't that correct, Corrin?
Yeah, so I'm in the UK. One of our agency clients is based in London or just outside, and so I'm hanging out at his place all month. He's going on tour, I think February 2nd through something else, through like February 10th or something, and then I get home after that. So like right now, if you're on YouTube, you can see behind me there's merch and all kinds of things. This was the easiest room to put me for the podcast. So, but yeah, it's been really cool. We actually had the opportunity to go to Cobalt Music in London last week, and I've just been talking with a lot of indies and industry people over here. And so there's some things that are very much the same and some things that are very different. So it's been very cool. I've only been here a week. I still don't sleep normal hours, I'm still up till 3 a.m. because I'm used to being home. So, but yeah, it's great. It's going really well.
That's what's up. That's awesome. Yeah. So, and you're going to do a meetup tomorrow night, right? We're recording this on Monday.
Yeah. So I think we resolved on Tuesday, the 28th, I want to say.
Because that's actually in a week. So it'll be the Tuesday after this podcast comes out. Pretty exciting if you're in London.
Yeah. So if you definitely check the Indies group, because I actually don't have any of the details in front of me, and I'm in a foreign country, so I'm not super quick on the whole thing. But I posted in the Indies group. It's really going to be informal. I mean, we were looking for kind of a sit-down venue, so we could do something like we did in Nashville, where everybody's just kind of hanging out and it's quiet and we can just have our own conversation. That didn't happen for London, unfortunately. So instead, we're going to just meet up, get a pint. We're going to a pub, and we'll just chat while we're drinking. So, which I think a lot of people might be down for. So.
Yep. And for any indies who might be listening in London, that's going to be at the Bricklayers Arms in London. I'm not quite sure. Oh, the address is 31 Gressy Street in London, United Kingdom. So, yeah, go check that out if you're in London. Get a chance to meet Corrin, meet some other indies. Should be fun to have a pint with some musos. That is, in the indies group?
Yeah.
Date on it is January 29th. Tuesday the 29th at 4 p.m.
But we're meeting at 4 p.m. London time. And that's so that everybody can kind of maybe beat the rush on the tube before everybody's going home. And then in theory, if we're there for a couple hours or longer, depending on how long you guys party, then we'll miss the rush out on the tube afterwards. So that was kind of the idea with that.
That sounds like a blast. So that, once again, that is at the Bricklayers Arms in London at 4 p.m. on Tuesday, January 29th.
Yeah.
Rock and roll. So this episode, guys, we're here to talk about and continue on entrepreneurial mindset, and also business processes month. So we're going to be talking about all month, which is almost over. It's crazy to think January is almost over already, but we're going to be continuing the discussion of running a business as a creative person. I don't think it comes intuitively to us, but I also think creatives have an aptitude for this kind of stuff once they start getting into that world. It's just that we're not typically exposed to entrepreneurs out there doing it, running successful businesses as creatives. That isn't typically who we end up hanging out with as we're coming up. So it's important to get some exposure to these concepts. I remember my first exposure to running a business was at Studio 18, formerly former recording studio I managed at, and then working for tech agencies and learning the agency game and what it's actually like to work under someone who started that company. So definitely really helped us out early on with Entrepreneur and continues through to this day to know those processes. And in the first episode of this month, we talked about some of those processes, some of the different things we do and other businesses do that artists can take cues from. And then we also talked about business tools that work really, really well last episode. This episode, we're going to talk a bit more about long-term planning. Since it's January, since you have that head start on the year, we want to talk about how you can program out your path to success, at least with some degree of certainty. It's important to note that you may think that there are people out there who minutely plan every detail of their year and then complete that, and they have a 1 and a 5 year plan and it all goes according to plan. But as far as my experience goes, I haven't experienced that ever happens. You make a plan so that you can trend towards it, but don't beat yourself up if you're not one of these people who can get every element of an itemized plan done, or if it doesn't work out exactly like that. That's not really the point of long-term planning. The point of long-term planning is just to have a direction that you're going, and it can take many, many forms.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's one thing too, like there's just like anything else that we learn while we're going through developing our music career, like first off, like the tools change and shift, right? And so the things that are available, you know, are going to change over time. So, you know, trying to be like, okay, this is going to be the master plan and everything's all spelled out. Even if you were able to do that, it's going to change anyway, right? It's like because various tools or strategies are not going to apply anymore, or new things need to be added and changed. So it's really, I think that's one thing that I've learned as someone who tends to be an over planner, is that I'll plan things that aren't actually really totally possible to be cemented into place. There are things that need to develop and change over time. So the more that you kind of get this, something that we say in the Army, and I think the Marines might have come up with it first, it's called Semper Gumby, which is like live flexible. And it's more tongue-in-cheek. It's not an official slogan of any kind, because Gumby doesn't mean a real thing in Latin or anything. But, you know, just the idea that it's like, okay, I want to understand the overarching scope of how these things work and how they talk and what's covered and what's still manual. And then, you know, being able to kind of adapt and understand that, you know, as long as you have that understanding, you'll be able to flex within it fairly easily.
Yeah, and like entrepreneurial coaching is a huge industry right now. Obviously, coaches, life coaches are huge, but coaching started out, as far as I know, the first coaching program was Strategic Coach by Dan Sullivan, I believe up there in Canada. And Dan talks about how he runs his day, and he says, I make sure that my day is dedicated to, at a maximum, 5 things. Because you can really only actually complete 5 things in a day, he says. I try to shoot for more than that usually, but he's definitely right that you typically think you can do more than you actually can, and usually dialing back your appetite on a given day for tasks will yield more adherence to what you had planned. And he also says, though, just like Corrin said, I give myself permission to drop any one of those tasks if it becomes necessary. I'm not going to ruin the rest of those tasks to just try to get this one difficult one done. I will drop it if I see that it's taking longer than anticipated. And I think that's really smart too, is that flexibility to say, you know what, this wasn't how I had planned it would be, and I have to be able to operate on the fly and kind of drop things as needed.
Right. Well, and I think that's too why, in the same way that we talk about our marketing funnels and how, you know, you can go ahead and like use a template, but you have to be able to adopt and make it your own and change things, right?
Yeah.
So in the same way, you want to do that with productivity and planning, you know, all the things that come up with the album, especially because, you know, with an album release or a tour or whatever, like things are going to shift and change, and you don't want to put yourself in a place where you paralyze because something didn't happen the way it should have. You know, when things don't go according to plan, the more concrete that plan is, the harder it is to pivot out of it. So, you know, it's good to have kind of an idea and sketch it out, but definitely that ability to kind of move and change as things, you know, change on you. It's definitely a better situation. So yeah, getting too hung up on, you know, whether or not you've ironed out every last detail of your plan. I know that's kind of a danger. Like, you know, right now, you know, Marie Kondo is the tidying up, you know, guru of the scene right now. She's got a Netflix documentary out about like decluttering your house and throwing away all your stuff. And for some people, they're like, that's too extreme. And it's like, well, then don't do something extreme, you know, do something that's reasonable for you. And so I hope that's what indies take from this as well, is that you could do all the things, but you don't have to be successful.
What? I think a lot of people get intimidated too. Like, I'm less worried about people stopping a plan they had started and more worried about the people who never start because they have this unrealistic, you know, view of what people who plan are actually like. And I'd like to demystify that, you know, that's why we're starting off with this topic for this episode, is that, like, it's important that you not put planning on a pedestal and the people who plan on a pedestal. They're just like you. They're just as discombobulated. They have just as many different distractions pulling them off of that plan. But the fact that the plan exists means they'll trend more towards it than if it didn't. And that's really what it's the long-term planning is all about.
Yeah, most definitely.
So yeah, I want to start this off by talking about that topic, long-term planning. Now, me personally, I'm a little bit different, and I've experimented with this. I'm not inherently a planner at all, and I think Corrin knows this. And so, yeah, like I kind of rush into things, and I had to develop this skill, and I'm still working on it. I'll buy a journal, a planner at the beginning of the year. Might use it, might not use it. I kind of give myself that flexibility. You know, I'm not going to beat myself up if I don't use it, but it puts that impetus on me to start a 1-year plan. Now, the planners usually come with a 5-year plan as well. So you're doing your 1 year, your 2 year, your 5 year. I find that it's very difficult for me to project out further than a year. I'm making stuff up just to fill in the 1 year, right? Just kind of like brainstorming. So it's not like I can really project out 5 years. And I mean, maybe there are people who can do that and stick to it, but I find it very difficult. And so I try to focus on the 1 year plan. What can I get done in the next year? And I really try to focus on things that are more crystallized than the minutia. So it's like, well, this year we know we wanted to start this YouTube channel. Check, right? And we know that we want to start getting involved in the conference circuit. We want to be talking more, Corrin and I, from stage. So that's one of our major initiatives this year. I know we want to start running contests so that, you know, while we do spend a lot on ads to grow this company and to make people more aware of what we offer, it would be cool if we were spending money on rewarding, you know, our community instead. And that can help with our growth. So we want to get into contests and giveaways. And there's some trainings that we want to get done, which we have a marketing calendar that has all the trainings we want to get done, all the themed months of content that we want to get done. So that's kind of the top level stuff. And I think that's most important, is major projects. If you're a musician out there, that might be an album, which takes a big chunk. It's like a dark hole in your calendar that swallows everything else up. Right. That can be the only thing that you have slated for this year, and it's the only non-negotiable, is I need to get this out, and I need it to be these certain conditions, right? You might say, I need to have a full marketing plan before it releases that I'm going to use to release it. So that way you're not just sort of fulfilling your goals by just putting an album out there, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And it kind of depends, but in most cases, I usually try to do kind of like we were talking about last week with Team Gantt, but making a Gantt chart. And even if you don't make a Gantt chart, just the fact that I start on a zoomed out level, right? So I will make the big chunks of the plan first, because subtasks are going to kind of make themselves evident without some of the planning. The more that you're involving third parties and contracting out work and whatever, like those are the things that you're going to want to drill into, because you'll know how to, set a budget and figure out all your costs and all of that stuff. But generally, like I try to zoom all the way out first, so that I can see like what are the big phases of this project before I get into individual tasks and then the subtasks of those individual tasks. And I think the reason, again, why that's a good idea is because it does make you more flexible as far as time. You just know a little bit better, like, okay, if the first phase gets delayed, all of these phases can move further right. And you don't have to like change all the individual dates of every little subtask, Like at that point, you're just like, all right, everything just shifted to the right a couple weeks. And so, I usually start big and then try to drill down to the smaller ones. And some of those subtasks I don't even do until I reach one of the tasks in a bigger project. So I won't even like iron out what all the little things are and what kind of timeline I'm looking at too far, because a lot of those things aren't things you can actually assign a due date to anyway. They're going to take the time that they're going to take, especially if you're working in tools that you're not familiar with. So putting all those dates out, 6-month project and having little subtasks with all the due dates on them, it can be a little excessive, and it can definitely just screw with your head, because the instant that you get a day behind, you're just like, oh crap, now, I have 50,000 tasks that are the wrong date.
Yeah, that's why Gantt charts are extra tight. And I think it's a puzzle,
P-tight.
right? Creating your P-tight, very
P-tight.
P-tight. Creating your goals for the year is a bit of a puzzle, and just like with any puzzle, like if you know those puzzles where they give you a number of different colored blocks and you have to fit them into this space, you start with the big blocks because it's obvious where they need to go, right? Like it's way more obvious than the little tiny ones. And that's kind of the same concept, is that it's much easier to say, look, the album's releasing in the fall. That shows me where a bunch of other medium-sized tasks need to go. And then I can get to the minutia, So really having that kind of 30,000-foot view is the first thing you're going to want to do. And it's the easiest to adhere to. Once you start getting into smaller tasks, smaller goals, it's going to be, they're a lot more flexible than the big ones. I'll say that. Easier to move around.
Right. I think too, and there's some things that are going to have kind of an assigned time of the year, right? So, it's not really as much of a thing anymore, but a lot of the bands I've worked with before, did Warped Tour, just like we did Warped Tour. And like, that's a fixed date. So when I would back plan from there, I know that Warped Tour isn't going to start later because I haven't done a project, So all of the things that we would do to prepare for that. So like merchandising and the logistics of, personnel and all of the set planning and the social structure and all of that stuff, then I was able to kind of back plan from a date instead of trying to, like, if I started today, when would it be done? And that's why you see a lot of artists, they might talk about how they're going to be in the studio or whatever, but a lot of artists won't talk about a project like an album until it's pretty much done, and then it's wrapped and like the marketing team is doing its job. So I think that's another thing that to keep in mind as you're doing these projects, especially if it's anything that's forward facing, is to be kind to yourself and not try to announce a date or announce a release or a tour before it's booked or before it's packaged or before, like figure out when it's like, okay, now I can let the fans know that this is a real thing that's going to happen. Otherwise, you can put a lot of undue pressure on yourself to try to reach some kind of date when you don't really know what that project's going to look like yet.
Yeah. I think getting those major projects out there on the timeline and kind of moving them around until it feels like you can accomplish that, that's going to be your first thing. Now, if you're just coming into Indie Pro and you're one of our Indie Pro members and you're wondering, how do I deal with each of these trainings and each of these marketing campaigns that I could set up? Well, I try to approach everything, including with our business, including with, my personal projects and everything I'm doing here at East Room Studios. Like, I try to plan it out as, what are the things that will be automated once I finish them? And I try to do those first. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like if you have a fan finder, right? You want to maybe get a fan finder out there running so that you have an asset that you can kind of turn on and off automatically and have it collecting you new listeners for you to remarket to once they're turned on to your music. Getting that out is a huge thing because once you do, it's like a checkpoint. It's a bookmark. You can turn that on or off. You never have to redo that work in a technical sense. Same with getting your website ready. Same with getting your email list shored up via our email marketing for musicians training. All of the broadcasting, the campaigns that you send out to your email list on a week-to-week basis, that's the minutia. You need to do them manually and they suck and it's just like brushing your teeth, right? It needs to happen every day and it's just, you got to get over it. But setting up the automation, that's something you do and then you don't have to redo for a very long time. And getting that stuff out of the way is important because it's really, you got to think about it as like setting up an employee, right? Your fan finder is like an employee in your business that goes out and finds you new listeners. Your automation campaigns and your email lists are like employees for your business that follow up with interested fans. Once you get them to work, they're working for you in the background. So getting them done first is kind of a primary goal. And then you can focus on your recurring content schedule, how you're going to be doing new things every week, the more maintenance style tasks.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to plan too, because automation is where glitches tend to happen, or your inexperience using a tool really starts to bear itself. And the last thing you want to be doing is like putting together automations like the day before something is supposed to launch and feeling a lot of pressure, feeling rushed, skipping a step, and you didn't even realize that you may have set something up in the automation that doesn't fire the way it's supposed to, and you've got 100 live people trying to come into it. I think that's the kind of stuff that you can easily set up in advance, test it out. In most cases, that's going to happen. I think there's only a couple of places, like if you're running a lead gen form on Facebook, which we don't recommend anyway, but if you were happening to do that, like you can't necessarily trigger zaps from a form that isn't built yet, So there's some things that you won't be able to build out as soon out as you'd like, but for the most part, you can build out all of this stuff before it's ever even active. All of your ManyChat sequences, all of the zaps that go from ManyChat or from your landing page to your mailing list. And the more that you kind of get ahead of it, not only does it give you more confidence for launch and take off some of the pressure, but it also gives you the true time you need to kind of feel like you've mastered that task. And I think that's really important too, is, making sure that you feel good about the tech that you're using and, not feeling any kind of pressure to be some kind of Superman and figure out everything in the last hour before things launch.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I take an approach to these things, especially like with this recent, launch of our YouTube channel, is like, I can't make a video every workday forever, right? But I can do it for a month until I know exactly what it takes. Right. And I can start to replace little bits of that workflow with other people on the team or with automation or with just getting a cleaner workflow in Premiere when I'm editing. So sometimes you're going to have to do something that's unsustainable to learn what is sustainable. And that can be a goal that you have. It can be a goal that you're going to bite off more than you can chew and then whittle it down to something that is more palatable. So that's something to remember, is that like, you don't only have to be doing what you're capable of all the time or what is feasible. Sometimes you can push it a little bit, knowing that, okay, I'm going to go through this month. It's going to be tough, but when I come out the other end, I'm going to know enough so that it won't be so hard. And that will frequently come up. But I think if you're planning out the major blocks for your year, try to focus on 2 to 4 reasonable, accomplishable, big tentpole goals that you want. And then everything else can kind of fold in around that. And those are your non-negotiables. So you don't have to plan them in any way that's unfeasible. You don't have to plan them in any way that's going to stress you out. You don't have to, it can be exactly what you want it to be. And as long as you're trending towards that, you're accomplishing your goals. I remember in the beginning of 2018, I wrote down in my business planner a bunch of stuff that didn't come to fruition, but we got about halfway there. And I don't know if I didn't plan out things that we can't accomplish that we would have gotten so far towards those goals, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it's telling yourself a narrative that is a little overwhelming to kick you into high gear and to stay on track towards that goal, knowing full well that you won't get there.
Right. I struggle with that too, honestly. We talked about that last week too, how Circa is like, let me just dive on into something that may or may not be humanly possible. And I'll do it until it's not humanly possible, Right. And I envy that about you, Cirque, because that's something that I'm not good at doing. I'm more of a cautious type, and definitely even with the things that we're trying to do for Indiepreneur, like I feel myself feeling like, okay, these are the things I want to do, but then every time I'm telling the team about it, there's like a qualifier in it, or like I'm under delivering, so but like not getting down on yourself about that as much as you're like, okay, what do I need to do to get this done? And just trying to shift your mindset. Yeah. I mean, I think that's something that entrepreneurs do all the time. I mean, if you're on Hulu and Netflix and you've seen what happened with Fire Festival, you've seen the documentaries that have been ablaze the last few days on those two channels about Fire Festival. You can see there's a case where someone didn't plan nearly enough and really faltered in a criminal sense almost, and you're not going to do that. That's not going to happen to you. You don't have to worry like that's the kind of fallout you're going to experience if you don't reach a goal. But something that, and say what you want about the guy, and obviously he's a con man, and there's a whole bunch of things going on there, but the fact that he had an idea and was trying to chase it, he just shouldn't have announced it before he got there. But Fire Festival would have been cool if it could have possibly been what he was envisioning. And, now he'll never achieve it because he set a due date that he just couldn't, he couldn't possibly hit. But that's the kind of dreaming that is going to, I think, inspire not just you, but, people around you, other indies who are watching what you're doing, your fans who are watching what you're doing. Like, if you don't set those kind of unattainable goals out in front of you, you're never really going to try to reach for that. You're just going to go with what's expected. And then, edging out any kind of any competition or just trying to edge yourself out even is not going to happen because you didn't even set a goal to do it in the first place. You just did what was expected. So, just don't do it in a criminal sense.
I think that guy's problem is you want to minimize the amount of people who will be shocked or disappointed if you fail at your moonshot.
Exactly.
So, you know what I mean? Like
you
want to pick a moonshot. Yeah, where like, no one will be upset or even really know if you fail, but if you succeed, everyone will be surprised. That's the ideal moonshot.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so
absolutely,
it's all about goal selection. There are things you need, right? As a musician, you need to put out music, whether that's singles, EPs, or albums. You're going to need to do that. That's what you do. That's what people love you for. But that can take any form. So you really can be selective in the outset of your year, and now's the perfect time because people don't actually tend to get to their New Year's resolutions until about February. So now's the time, right? Sit down with Asana, which we went over last week, for a free Asana account. Strike up a board and create cards for your main projects that you want to get done this year and start itemizing them out. And I think that's the next thing I wanted to head into was you can take a big old chunky goal and make it as granular and predictable as you want it to be. And we do this frequently in our company. We'll take something as chunky as, I'll take a real use case. Recently, every week on Wednesday, we go live to our Indie Pro members to answer questions, audit their marketing assets like emails, ads, landing pages, and just give them direct help from our staff. That's something that all of our members have access to. But because I'm doing it and I have so many other hats in the company, sometimes it's late or sometimes it's wrong or sometimes the replay doesn't get in the library as quick as it should. So I knew I needed to get that out of my hands. But I can't just tell one of our team members, or especially a new team member like Kenny here, who's in the office today, I can't tell him, hey, every Wednesday, go replace the Indies Live sign-up page and then, post the last one on the library. He doesn't know any of that. right?
Right.
So I need to chunk it down to understandable pieces. But I'll tell you what, it made me better at, I could do it better if I had to do it just because I chunked it down to that. I now have a checklist from start to finish where people who know, anyone who knows nothing about that task can complete it. And soon Kenny will be able to teach it to someone. And it's because of the itemization of this big chunky goal into its bite-sized pieces. And even doing that, if you're just the only person on your team, doing that for yourself makes it so much easier. So whenever I have a chunky task to complete, whether it's in Notepad or in Asana, and you know, it can take those forms. Sometimes it's a Notepad and that's bad, and sometimes it's in Asana and that's good for our team. Whatever form it takes, I'm taking that big chunky goal and I am breaking it down into parts, and then breaking those parts down into parts until I feel like anybody could follow it. And I think that's going to, as a matter of practice, that's going to help you take these big, intimidating moonshots and boil them down to a work day every day.
Yeah. Well, that also ensures that you do something the same way, like once you know how to do it, even if it's like you're not totally sure, like you couldn't just like, you know, do it like that. Even if you couldn't do it that fluently, if you have this list and you do it the same way every time, right? Like I know I probably have YouTubed how to fold fitted sheets 25 times at least, because I still can't master it. But I end up just like, you know, doing a search for it, and I get a different person's video every time. And some of those people fold them differently. And then the information doesn't look familiar to me. And I'm like, wait, is that how I did it? And like, then I don't know if I'm doing it correctly. You know, so in the same way, creating kind of a checklist, even if it's just for yourself at first, and then being like, okay, this is the way I'm always going to do this until something in it doesn't work anymore. It ensures that no steps are skipped, that you get more fluent in the task because you've done it the same way so many times. And I think like that's, even if there's more than one way to do it, as long as the way you're doing it is, you know, actually gets the task done, then all that's doing is making you more fluent in the task. And then also, again, as Circa is saying, allows you to pass it on. But, you know, if you try to reinvent how you do certain tasks every time you do it, or even if you're like trying to go back to like our trainings and figure out, okay, wait, where in the module was he talking about that? If you do it that way, I think it's going to be really difficult to kind of master that skill and make it a skill where it doesn't take you a lot of brain, you know, effort anymore. Yeah,
you're not burning as many calories. Yeah, I mean, and it's really useful to think about everything like that. Like if you tie your tie a bit wonky and have to reference a video every time, you haven't yet written the software in your brain that makes that happen without incident.
Right.
And you can rewire your own software. You know, you can take things that you just fumble through every day and you can re-itemize them in your mind, make a step-by-step checklist, follow that checklist until it's muscle memory, and now your software is better. So you can upgrade your software for any task that you're doing. It just takes breaking it down into those component parts and going through it until it's ironed in there. And that's, I also don't want this to get intimidating, because I spoke at the beginning about how, like, look, no one's batting 100 here. Or 1,000 or whatever it is. No one's batting 400, right? Isn't that no one's batting 400. So don't worry about it because we have like checklists in our Asana board that are half finished and have been for 8 months. So don't think that we're like Mr. and Miss Perfect over here, right? We're not.
Right.
But we do have some checklists that are finished and that work. So, you know, in producing something that is productive and replicable, you're going to have skeletons of things that are awful, right? And just you got to get over that. You got to ignore that, and you got to make it okay for yourself to do that, because otherwise you'll never get to something that works for you.
Right. Definitely.
And then, yeah, once you've got, and I mean, really, you want to front load in the year the things that are going to work for you all year. So if you need, you know, if you're going to have an automated marketing campaign for your latest album, build that first, because it's going to run for you all year. And then you can get to your need to do's on a daily basis. Now, if you're checklisting out your processes, it sets you up to hand that task over to someone else. And once again, we haven't done this for everything in our business, but a lot of what we do these days is codifying what we did last year into a format that someone who's less experienced in our company can handle. And I think for any musician who's growing, if you're already touring or you're already doing good with merch, you're headed towards that spot. Now, you can get a manager who's going to do that for you badly. Or, you know, not all managers will do it badly, but like a lot of them will. A lot of them aren't necessarily more experienced than you or more intelligent than you. They just don't have the same plate that you have. Right. And so I think the more you can do it yourself, the less money you're going to lose in your long-term career trajectory. You lose money because you need someone to do something you don't know how to do or don't have the time to do. But the more you intimately know about your business processes, the more potential you're going to get to keep right there at home.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think too, that's something that, you know, people are cognizant of, but not always, is that, you know, learning how to do all of these things. It's not just that you're trying to run a business, but it's also that you're trying to run your business with the maximum amount of margins possible. You know, music is a difficult thing to profit off of, you know? So the more that you're outsourcing all of these different things, whether it's running Facebook ads or social media, you know, content planning and stuff like that, the more that you're outsourcing, the less money that your company is going to potentially make. So I know there's a lot of indies who are pretty frugal and, you know, don't pay for a lot of stuff, and they're using a lot of free tools and all of that. But as you know, start to set up the infrastructure of what you're doing, and especially if you're making any tech stack investments that we recommend, you know, those costs add up fast. So the more that you can kind of figure out, you know, what the tasks are that you want to outsource, and if you give them this kind of list, not only does it make you feel like, okay, they've got it covered, but also if I'm paying this person, especially hourly, they're going to be able to do this more swiftly because they don't have to go figure out how to do it, and they don't have to spend hours with me trying to pick my brain on how to do it. Like, you could literally take somebody who's not very skilled, who is going to work for less money than someone who's like an expert in the task, and you can give them a checklist and they get it done. So, you know, it's just about kind of setting up things that even if you're not at a point where that's something that's reasonable for you right now, you're thinking about, okay, I'm in the future, I'm going to need people, you know, and I want to pay them well, but I also want to minimize my expenses. And that's another way to do that, is by developing these lists and tasks and, you know, kind of segmenting it all out properly.
Definitely. And I mean, that's not to say that it's just for the purpose of handing off to other employees and growing your team. It's going to make you more efficient. It means less work later on. And it means that you're getting the right software in your brain. When you first onboard to a set of tasks that you're not familiar with, you kind of struggle through it. And if after first struggling through it, you go back and say, okay, how do I do this without all those hiccups I just went through? And you make yourself that checklist. And now you're following that. So you're not burning in this fumbling manner of doing this task into your brain. You're burning in the checklist, which is a lot more efficient. So yeah, I think it's definitely a must-have. So we talked about, okay, you want to plan out, you know, a nice year plan. What do you want to get done in this year? Figure out where the big chunky tasks go on the timeline. Then you want to itemize them down to step-by-step instructions for yourself, or at least something that you can log on in the morning when you have time to do work on your music or your creativity, and you can pick a task and get it done within that time frame you have. When the tasks are that small, then you're good to go. Because even if you only have 2 hours in a given day after work to work on your career, well, you have tasks that fit into that 2-hour time frame, and you're not constantly context switching and all that. So that's super important. Now, we've also talked about how you want to get the automatable stuff out first so that it's doing the work for you for longer while you're doing the kind of tedium. And now I want to talk about kind of planning your pathway for more established artists versus new artists. Because if you're a new artist, your year-long kind of direction should be building fan base. Like, number one, you need to be exposing your music to people in a way that allows you to follow up with them later and know that they responded positively to it, ideally with a fan finder or with any number of other kind of top of funnel or first touch, meaning the first thing that someone sees from you. Those kinds of campaigns is really what you should be focused on, which means you need creative. You need content that's going to serve that purpose and get someone interested in your music. You need marketing campaigns that are delivering that content to the right people. And you need a general idea for what you're going to do with those people immediately after that point, so that you can be building sort of this checkpoint audience of people who have not only heard from you, dug what they saw, but now know who you are and can attribute that experience of seeing your content back to you as a person. And that's kind of a nice safe space where you can reach back out to those people at any time later on and they're going to remember you.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this multiple times before as well, but making sure that things are feeling current to that person. So there's a certain level of automation that's acceptable, and then there's a certain amount where it's like, okay, I need to, even if you're not, individually messaging people, we're not saying that, but, sending out campaigns that have timely information in them that feel like they're not just on some kind of autopilot. Because when, say you've got an automation running for 6 months, if the person comes in at the beginning of that 6 months and then, they're done a few weeks in or whatever, at that point, like, what are you doing for the rest of those 5 months? You don't want to build out 5 more months of automation. So, but the automation portion allows some of that new acquisition to be automated properly. And I think, that's something that you kind of have to be cognizant of, is like, how do I need to go back and check in on some of these things and make sure that they have the most current information in them? Are there some updates that I need to be making? So kind of putting those things on your calendar so that you know that that's something that you're going to have to check in with. That takes you out of being really actively involved in things that can be automated, but is still making sure that it's in your brain, or on your calendar, probably more than in your brain. It's in your calendar to remind you, like, ping, like, there's something you need to check in on, just make sure this is going how it should. So, I mean, I think there's a really, it's a difficult balance to get, because you don't want it so out of sight, out of mind, and so automated that you're like deadening the audience either,
Right. Yeah.
So when you really plan it out, you can start to see, okay, these are the things that are going to need my active attention at that time. And these are the things that don't. And it's hard to do that without a plan, because you can't, you can't juggle them both in your brain with everything else that you're doing.
Yeah. And we're, by the way, our How to Run Your Music Business training, which includes a lot of this type of thinking, basically shows you how we run Entrepreneur on a week-to-week basis and the tools we use and all that. That training is now available on our products page. If you go to entrepreneur.io/products, you can totally get that training standalone, or if you're an Indie Pro member, it's available now. Also in Indie Pro is email marketing for musicians, and there's an automation sequence that should go in everyone's email marketing platform that we have called an introduction series. Our introduction series uses this best of concept where we're giving people our 3 most popular pieces of content for free when they sign up to our email list, just as a manner of onboarding them to the company. But every 3 months, it's a new 3 pieces of content that are most hot right now. So every quarter we should be swapping that out. Now, we haven't been so great about swapping it out. We actually just recently did. But every quarter we should be swapping that out. So that should go in Asana, or it should go in our calendar, and we should know or get a reminder that needs to happen. And that's just really just setting yourself up for future-proofing yourself, right? Like, you're not going to hit it 10 out of 10.
It's automating yourself.
There's going to be stuff where you miss. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Like, so you're using the tech tools to automate your brainwaves because you get a ping.
Yeah, so you don't have to remember.
Yeah. And it keeps it out of your brain and in a place that's trusted, Yeah.
You're maximizing the chances for success and minimizing the chances for failure. There are no absolutes. There are, it's all trade-offs. So you're just generally trending towards getting the things you want done more And that
Right.
positive trend is going to make a dramatic difference, a year, 2 years down the line. But if you're just starting out, that's what you want to do is you're focused on building fan base and as a secondary, getting their contact information. So installing bribes in your online presence where someone who likes your music might see it and sign up to your email list or sign up to your messenger list to get some promised value. When you have those installed, you have the capability of automatically creating new fans and getting them signed up to your email list. Now you're ready to head into a new phase, and getting those cleared out early in the year is going to be massive for you. So if you're brand new, you want those two mechanisms. How do I get new fans and how do I get their contact information so that I'm building a database of contactable fans that I can later make cool offers and run cool experiences to.
Right. Something that helps me when I'm doing this automation and these project phases, right? Like to make sure that all this like support pieces that I have like set reminders in my calendar for all the things that is like, oh, I should check in on this and this and this, is when I just look at the buddy system, like that cloverleaf where it comes back to nurturing. And so like knowing where different people are in the phase and knowing what automation picks them up and then knowing what things are not automated and doesn't pick them up, that sometimes it can help to kind of overlay all of your projects, and all of the different phases that you're looking at accomplishing, kind of overlaying it on the buddy system and being like, okay, what am I missing in between these phases? What are the things I need to do between, so say I get someone through the education phase and then I want to sell them something. Well, I need to do some nurturing first. And so that can help you kind of really fine tune your tasks, your recurring tasks, and the things that you will set up as an alarm to check in on. That's something else that really helps me just kind of get all of that stuff organized, because it's definitely not intuitive when you're trying to do all of that at once.
One thing I wanted to do this year and still want to do is revamp a lot of the existing trainings, the trainings that were recorded, a while ago and need to be updated. So I want to get those training updates out, but we've got this YouTube channel launch and starting to do our contests in Q1, right? So once I get that settled and filed away, and a lot of the YouTube content creation is automated through one of our other team members or through various processes, then I can focus on that training updates, and other members of the team will be creating new trainings, so I'll have that time. But I want to update the buddy system, because what's important about the buddy system is just like Corrin said, there are visible checkpoints in it where if a fan gets here, I don't necessarily need the next thing for them right away. And I think permission, if you have your email automation installed, that's huge. That's a major checkpoint where all you have to do is do your weekly email to your fan base and maybe segment it by, the types of subscribers you're sending it to, change the copy a little bit, but that's a weekly recurring task that takes very minimal amounts of your attention on a week-to-week basis, and it keeps your fans warm once they've made it to that checkpoint. So that if you have automation that it gets them from never having heard of you to email subscriber, that your automation and your weekly recurring email is going to take care of the rest. And that's huge. So getting to that checkpoint is of massive importance for a new artist, because then you can be in growth mode. Then you can be working on growing that list, growing that audience throughout the rest of the year. And you're not going to lose potential. You're not going to lose ad dollars that you spent getting them interested in the first place.
Right. Yeah, because that's the worst. It's the worst. People say a paper cut's the worst. It's not the worst, but it sucks. But like that sucks is when you do all these great campaigns, you bring people into the album launch. They may even buy something, right? That it never
and then
means
you're like,
that
I don't know if
now
they're
cold
done or not.
Yeah, like, oh, now it's safe. Now they're never going to leave me. And it's like, well, no. Congratulations for getting them that far. But, like, it's just continuous. And if you don't figure out how to set these little reminders on your calendar and these little recurring tasks, it can start to just feel very overwhelming that now there's people and you might let them down and there's all of these tasks you have to do to support all of it. Like, if you really put it on a calendar, and you're like, okay, I'm going to need an hour for that, it can actually end up being a lot less time than you thought. because now you've got the structure in place. You've got your checklist, so you're ultimately efficient when you run through the task, and it ends up taking you 30 minutes, but it's something that's then off your brain, and you don't have to think about it again until it pings you again. So definitely, like, the more that this structure gets in place, it's not really as much about planning as it is owning and understanding the tools that you're using, so that when you go to do those tasks, it's quick, it doesn't weigh on your brain, and you're not feeling overwhelmed. Because if you're an independent musician, you're just doing way too much to be given too many cares about having stuff just follow you around all week.
Yeah, and I mean, as a new artist, I think we just really well itemized how you would get to a place where you feel safe not working on a major new project, right? Because as long as you're sending those weekly emails and your automation is sound, you really don't have to do anything, but you are spending ad dollars to bring these people in. So now you want to monetize that email list. You want to monetize that audience. And so whether you're a new artist and you figure you can get that part done in the first half of the year and now you want to plan out the second half, or you're an existing artist who has long since built that automation and built that email list, your next goal after creating an audience and an email list is creating customers. So converting people from just interested to, hey, I'm going to support the music, I'm going to support the creativity and buy a product. So now you're working on product design, product iteration, sales pages, and sales campaigns. So and that's really a primary amount of your focus because, like we said, everything's taken care of back there. You're doing your weekly emails, and now you have all this other bandwidth where your automation is taking care of what you need to be doing to build that audience. So now you have time, and that time should now be dedicated to building out those products, having a storefront, running some sales campaigns. And this is where you really want to plan out at the beginning of the year what your sales campaigns are, because they usually fall on holidays. You could have a MLK Day campaign like for this week. You could have, a Easter sale. You could have a summer sale. You can have a fall sale, a Thanksgiving sale, Black Friday, Christmas. You want to plot out these dates, especially if you're already offering products, because they have a tendency to sneak up on you, and then you're scrambling to get a campaign out to all these people who are, let's be honest, they're expecting a sale. People put products on sale at these times. So they might not be expecting it in a conscious way, but just by what they're being blanketed with at that time, it's going to feel a little less attractive, whatever you're offering, if it's not on sale.
Yeah, I think too, there's optimal times for those kinds of sales. And then also, we saw, costs on ads go pretty high over the holidays because everyone was advertising sales, especially pretty much from Black Friday through like New Year's. It was just like, wow, everything is more expensive right now. And so you definitely want to plan what those out are ahead of time so that your people maybe kind of know that it's coming, or you can tease it, right? Another strategy is to do your own sales on things that are of significance in your brand. So if that's this is the 10-year anniversary of this release, or this is the day we got together and it's National My Band Day. You know what I mean? And you can just claim it yourself. Just call it, But no matter what it is, making sure that you're planned out ahead of time, that, your campaigns are planned, your budget's planned, all of that stuff. It just takes off the pressure of trying to, work in ads manager when everybody's running ads right now. You could have already built it out, just knowing that all you have to do, it's already been reviewed, all the ads are good, all your zaps are good, and all you have to do is flip the campaign on. That's a way better position to be in than feeling like, okay, ads manager's buggy, my audiences won't populate, it won't approve my ad, it's been sitting in review for 6 hours, and I was claiming a sale that should have started 12 hours ago and is over 12 hours from now. You don't want any of that stuff to be happening. So getting ahead of those things, I agree with Cirque. That's a great plan.
Yeah, I think also it goes back to what we were talking about, just chunking down these tasks. You might have something on your calendar that says just Easter sale. And it's okay, well, what are the assets that need to be created for that, right? First you might say, I want to hit people on email. I want to hit them on ad platform and messenger. which means I need copy for all of those things. Now, where am I sending them? Ideally, a sales page, right? What's going to be on that sales page? Images, copy? Well, okay, now you have those assets to prepare. If you want to do a video sales letter or a head-on video to sell the product or announce the sale, then you have to put that together. And then you might think, okay, well, I want an edit for the sales page, and then I want a shorter edit for the ad platform so I can run the video as an ad. So you're creating a list of assets and a list of to-dos, and you're chunking it down, and now you can work from January through Easter at a minimal capacity to get all that done, and it can all fall in line. So it's like dominoes, man. You want to set them up so you can have them go down cleanly and in sequential order. So that's definitely something to do at the beginning of the year is itemize where your sales are going to happen if you're at that level yet, and start chunking down those tasks to know what you got to get done for that to happen. And then you might be at a place where you are creating customers out of subscribers and listeners. You are ascending existing customers to follow-up products and getting them reinvested into, the next release cycle. You know how to do that pretty well. You've got checklists that are prepared for that kind of thing. You know how to break down a sale into its component parts. You know how all your tech stack works. And now you've done that part. But now you want to throw some gas on the fire. And this is where we really consider a business to be at its structural soundness. Like Entrepreneur, it wasn't too long ago that Entrepreneur got to this level. And that's where you can really start throwing that gas on the fire. Everyone thinks, oh, I'm going to go get a bunch of exposure and a business will spring up underneath me as I ascend to the heavens. But that's not how it works. That's not how it works. So, and a lot of one-hit wonders have figured that out in a very cruel and harsh way. So what I would hope that you would get from this is that you want to build that foundation, because then exposure matters. Then vanity metrics matter, because you have a system behind it that if they come in through any entry point, they're going to go through the automation and get spit back out as a engaged and excited fan and even customer. So now you can go out there and go for those exposure moonshots, get on a TV show, get on a playlist, get on the radio, whatever you want to do, because you know that you'll be maximizing the value of all the attention that comes from that. And at that time, you can start to create a team, because you have sales coming in, you have revenue coming in, you can sort of pawn off some of these tasks that you're doing as a matter of minutia or mundanity every single week to someone who's ready to learn. And you want them to grow too. You definitely don't want to be giving a checklist to someone for them to run into infinity. So you want them to be growing. You don't want to just be sort of like, hey, you're a trained monkey, do this. That's not the point of this, right? You want them to become as efficient at these tasks as you are at that point, so that they're ready for that next step too. And we could talk a lot about building a team. I won't go into a big sort of tangent right now, but that's definitely a concern, is you don't just want to be pawning off stuff that you don't want to do onto people. You want to be building them. So take time to teach them. Take time to give them more interesting tasks. Take time to kind of see where their aptitude lies. But that's the point being that once you've gotten through that, I need to build an audience and an email list phase, and you've gotten through that, I need to be creating sales, revenue, and customers phase. Now you can focus on moonshots while training a team to handle the maintenance and betterment of that system that you erected over those 2-year, grinds.
Definitely. Yeah. So it's retaining your investment from the first layer of things and then building upon it. So I think it's something else to think about is that you might have bandmates that end up, usually what I end up hearing from indies anyway is that I'm so on board with this, but my band, man, they're not into it. And they won't go into the training or whatever. There's always like, in a lot of bands, there's always like the one guy who's like, no, I'm going to do all the things, and everybody else is like, meh, I'm not into it, But if you have this task list, right, it's so much easier to be like, okay, Jordy, go get on guitar and do this thing, and then once you shoot that video, like, give me this content, and it can be a lot easier to get the people who are in this with you, so if you're a startup band and you're not like, we're not going to hire anybody. We are no place to like hire a team. Like this is another way to task out your band members, which if your bands are anything like mine, yeah, like the more that you can simplify it, it gets things done better, you know?
Yeah. And it's also like, think about it like this. Back at the first phase we talked about, you need to build a fan base and you need email subscribers. Back there, you're liable to give someone 10% of your entire career to do that.
Right,
Not
exactly.
really even knowing full well, you know, what they should be doing. You're hoping they know. So you're liable to make much less safe hiring and team building decisions way back there. And I had to really, you know, like when Corrin and I first met, I was like, holy crap, like, thank God, because it's very difficult to find someone who's got as much in and who knows the same things you know and who sees it the same way that you do. Very, very difficult, not likely to happen. Those are the types of people you want to give equity. Those are the types of people you want to get invested at the same level you're invested. But they don't come along very often. And you can mitigate your risk a lot by kind of grinding it out until you're at that point where you can hand off a checklist. Handing off a checklist minimizes your risk because you can pay someone, you know, $8-10 an hour or even $12 an hour to do that checklist. If they do good at that, you move them up. And now you can kind of gauge their ability instead of saying, hey, I don't know what you should be doing. I need a lot of help. Here's half of the company. I hope it works out. That's a dangerous place to be in. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
yeah, definitely.
So yeah, you can avoid those kinds of mistakes.
I felt the same thing because if y'all don't know, like I was running my own agency and doing just the agency side of things before I came to Entrepreneur. And through the Digital Marketer podcast, which I listened to religiously, that's where I came across Cirque's interview. And I'm like, whoa, there's someone like me. Because for the longest time, I didn't think that there was anyone else out there who was thinking about this the way that I was, which, I mean, that's a little naive, but I couldn't find them, right? Even if they existed, I had no idea where they were. So that was kind of a lucky thing. But the coolest thing now is that, you know, through the training, like, you know, Jack has a ton of experience outside of, you know, Entrepreneur training, but he also went through the Entrepreneur training. And so as he's done more and more with us, like we know that we're on the same page because we're fostering some skills and knowledge and mentorship into him. And so the same thing can happen with your various team members. Like, because if I tried to hire somebody who is considered like at Jack's level as far as executing some of this stuff, like I couldn't trust that their foundation was in the same things, that they weren't just a dopamine addict, that they weren't just working with some, you know, label or management company that's like, we're going to throw $1 million at it and get all these views and then we'll be able to sell at this tour. Like it's a very, you know, there's no buddy system, there's no relationship curation psychology that's applied in a lot of these people. So if you spend the time to develop people who are going to work with you, you also you're able to make sure that you're on the same page, and any of the things that they don't know and you give them a page out of your book, they're not going to have any other page to reference. You know what I mean? Which sounds a little like brainwashing, and that's not how I mean it, but it ensures that, you know, if you're willing to give the time and effort to develop people either in your band or, you know, around you, to help you kind of build this stuff up and they grow with you, it's definitely just a better way to set a good foundation so that, you know, you've got more and more educated people who are kind of applying the same principles that you know to be correct and right and best for your business.
Yeah, and I mean, this like we've really largely talked about the digital approach to building a music career, any creative career. Is we talk about it in those phases where, like, look, if you're just starting out, fans and subscribers, that's what you want, which will then prove useful in getting customers and revenue. And then customers and revenue, the next phase is team and moonshots, team and exposure, team and, you know, some big thing, chunky thing. So that definitely applies in the digital space, but you can take these exact same lessons and carry it over to how you tour. Take these exact same lessons and carry it over to your studio work. And it's, trust me, in digital, you can make a lot of mistakes because everything is cheap and you can afford to, mess up. But in the studio and on tour, that's not the case. So, it's a great sandbox, a great playground to get down your systems and processes and then carry it over to something a little bit more high stakes like touring and being in the studio, which is very, very expensive. And probably when I was running a studio, the main thing we saw people waste money on is not having a plan when they come into the studio.
Right.
And I don't make that mistake. When I'm in the studio, it's like, I know I need this done, this done, this done. It's a checklist that we're going down. We're not hanging out. We're not, brainstorming. I'm not writing lyrics. It's all ready to go.
Right. Yeah, because you're paying for time at that point. So, and with touring, it's like we've said before, if there's one dead room, and there's so much to do to coordinate a tour. So if it's not planned and you don't maximize that appearance, it could cost you a lot of money. And also, like,
no one does
always say,
checklists like tour managers.
Right, exactly. So, but tour managers, a lot of the tour managers I know have it way more together than a manager, than a general manager.
They have to.
Because they have to have all the logistics in place, because you're not expected to remember everybody's name and phone number and the capacity of a venue and what rate they're charging on your merch sales and whatever. Like, that would be unreasonable to store in your brain 24/7. But for some reason, like on the general management side of the house, there seems to be less of that happening. They're expected to just remember things and know things off the top of their head and track their tasks in their head. And I've never understood that. Like, you want to spell it out the same way a tour manager does. Have a day sheet. This is what I'm doing today. And it makes it a much more pleasant experience, and you're mitigating your risk both in the studio and on tour. Like, you're just mitigating what things could go wrong and the money that you're investing into that project.
Yeah, big time. And I've just got two last tips for anyone going through this process or getting ready to plan out their year, or just wants a bigger 30,000 foot view of their career trajectory. One thing I'll say is that there are a lot of talkers in this industry. There's a lot of people who have a lot of meetings and don't actually get things done. And it's, you know what I mean? So you want to safeguard yourself that by knowing that if it goes into a sauna or it goes into somewhere where it's going to spit back out at you someday, it's real. And until it goes in there, it's not real. It's just a talk you had or some plan, harebrained scheme that you came up with. Once it's in a sauna or some task management application, it is real. And that's something we live by here at the team, because you can't forget it. One day you might, even if it's one day when you're cleaning out a sauna, it's going to stare you in the face. And that makes it a real thing.
Yeah, definitely. Which is why, we say, like, put it in a trusted place. So even if a sauna is not where you end up going, having it somewhere that's trusted, where it's not going to get lost. Like, I know I have a Mac and my notes are a mess. Like, there are some notes I probably haven't opened in years because I bought new Macs and then they just transferred over. And, like, that's not a trusted place. You need a trusted place where things aren't going to, just crazy delete. And also where it's going to have to stare you in the face, so that even if there's, some good idea that you have for a year later, it's going to, like, revisit you, and that you can trust that can happen. I think it's important to have that kind of system.
Definitely. Yeah. And to have that habit of checking where you put it, that ensures that it's going to come back up. And then if you follow our advice on this episode and you go and you plan out your year, you break out Google Calendar and Asana in your planner and you triple entry just to make sure you're going to remember, and you start doing it, and it comes, it becomes February or it becomes March, and you're looking around for some validation of whether or not you are further than you were before. Your only measuring stick in March is February. It's not the other people in your music scene. It's not someone you saw out there on the internet. It's not your buddy. It's you last month, period. Right. Don't look at other horses in the race. Don't pay attention to what other people are doing, and don't use what they're doing to measure what you're doing. Your only measuring stick is you yesterday. I'll say that.
Good advice. Good advice. Yeah, Circa always does that, because we're very aware of a lot of the other gurus and courses and things out in the space, you know? And Circa, every time something comes up, if it's fishy or if we're like, oh man, look at this, or even if it's a good thing, we're like, whoa, this is actually really good. Cirque's always like, just keep your head down, you know, and don't you know, don't mind the man behind the curtain, you know, because in the end, what that person's doing or not doing is not impactful on what you're accomplishing unless you allow yourself to be distracted and accomplish less than you could have. Otherwise, it's not even useful information. So that's the other thing is like going into Asana and looking at your completed tasks for last month. You know, anytime that you're feeling like, man, I feel like I didn't get anything done. Like if you have one of those moments, you can go into Asana and be like, no, look at all this stuff I got done. It's all checked off. Like that's the kind of stuff that is just psychologically healthy for you, you know? So, but yeah, Cirque definitely has to tell me to keep my eyes on my own paper at certain times. I'm like, I don't know about this, man. In fact, we just had a convo like that earlier today, or last night because I'm on UK time. But he's like, yeah, well, you know, whatever. We're going to do what we do. And I think it's a really healthy thing for musicians, especially just the way the industry is so geared about, you know, fantastical Instagram accounts and dopamine addictions and all of this stuff. Like it's just keep your eyes on your own paper and have a system where you can track, okay, this is what I did and I'm good with that. And this is where I'm going, you know, done.
Right. Well, yeah, there's always going to be someone out there who's better than you. And if you can't find them, you're not looking hard enough. You know what I mean? So if you pay attention to the external, you know what I mean? You're always going to be and feel less than. And similarly, there's no limit to how far down you can slip into the pits of despair, right? So if you don't start looking at where you were yesterday as the measuring stick, you're going to lose sight of what's important. So make sure that what matters is that you can do this for years to come. It doesn't matter that you do it quicker than this other person or this other, you know, brand or whatever it is. It matters that you can stick it out. You know, we're like a cockroach, man. We're not going anywhere. So everything else can, you know, you can throw whatever at us. It's fine because we don't really pay attention to the other people in our space or to other artists compared to the artists we work with. It's just not part of our concern. And thereby we're going to be around a lot longer than people who are fatiguing their mind with worries of the competition. And I'll say this about competition. There's no such thing as competition. Not a lot of people will tell you that, but like we're 7 billion people in the world right now. And unless your market that you're in is at full saturation, competition doesn't exist. You're not competing with people for other people. You're competing with people for no reason. So, you know, rising tide raises all ships. So if you're in a scene and there's, you know, let's say you're a hardcore band and your local hardcore scene is strong and there's people out there who are killing it, like admire them and learn from them. But don't use their trajectory as evidence of where you're at. It's a terrible geolocation device.
Or trying to assess what other people are doing from the outside and shifting your course to try to match what you think.
A lot of them are lying.
Them.
You know, a lot of them are not giving you the straight dope on where they're at. They're projecting a better them.
So full of shit. So if you adjust to like trust your plan, you know, and you usually can get some pretty good feedback, especially if you're in the indies group or, you know, if you ever have a chance to come on a live Q&A, like we'll give you feedback about, you know, if you feel like your plan is totally wrong. But for the most part, you're probably doing the right thing. And so trying to simulate someone else's trajectory or their arc is just probably not a good idea.
Yeah. And the only way, like, because a lot of people see someone way ahead of them and it's like, yeah, but they might, they may be more successful than you, but they might have some kink in the road coming as a you know, a consequence of their fast rise. And one day you'll pull ahead. And that's totally true if you keep going, right? But it can never be true if you stop because you feel you're never going to get there. So give yourself that opportunity to pull ahead of people by just keeping your head down, focus on your own race.
Definitely. Yep. I'm for it.
So if you've heard this episode and you dug what you heard, I suggest you go put it into action. Program your year out. It's okay if it's the first time you did it and you really don't know what you're doing. you're going to get better at it as long as you keep doing it. And you're going to trend more towards the goals you plan out as long as you are doing it. So I recommend you go do that. And then if you want to learn more about how to run your music business efficiently, you can go check out our training, which is in Indie Pro right now, or in these show notes, go to entrepreneur.io/episode 79, and we have that training available standalone. And besides that, unless you have anything else to say, Corrin?
Not me. I'm good.
Not you? All right. Well, then we will see you guys next week on Creative Juice.
Can y'all really feel the East Coast, feel the West Coast,